Bring our next guest in. He's a regular and we enjoy his positive, vibrant chat. Anton Ginning, good morning. Welcome back to the front page.
Robert, Cameron, great to be back. Thank you so much for having me. As always, love our chats and can't wait to get into some of the topics we're going to.
Now, you've been doing some interesting stuff. You put little media releases out. And when I first met you, we were focused on workplace activity. You, for those who haven't met you, Anton Ginning was a young fellow who stuck a screwdriver in the wrong hole during his electrical apprenticeship and did a little bit of damage to himself, and then thought, I should spend some time protecting people from doing silly things in the workplace, and you put a lot of focus into that, which is good. But you've been delving into other areas, and it's an important thing in the workplace still. It's about leadership. It's about sending the right messages. It's about bringing people together, and at the moment, we're in a bit of a confusing state in that area.
Oh, we are, Robert, and thanks for the intro too. And that's where it all started, with that switchboard incident that sort of caused a massive explosion, second-degree burns to about 15% of my body, which was actually pretty average at the time. And they've got to do this thing called debriding, which means removing skin forcibly, which is a bit yucky food, to help the healing process, apparently. So yeah, I spent a lot of time, mate, working in that space. And it wasn't long after I started, the people and organisations and leaders started saying, hey, it's good that you're talking to the teams about, work more safely, but how do we help leaders? How do we help leaders encourage people to work more safely? How do we help leaders step into the big decisions they need to make when they've got priority calls, like whether it's schedule over safety, right? And, or cost over safety. How do we get leaders to buy into that safety is important? And so we did a fair bit of work in that space, and now that's developed into not just physical safety, Robert. So I've now got a psych degree and a HR degree and a whole range of other stuff that I can now draw on to talk about psychological safety. And that's this space where people come to work, Robert, and they actually don't want to be emotionally injured at work, yeah? And psychological safety is about giving people a voice and making it okay for people to speak up, making it okay for people to share their opinions and their views, and not just leaders making it safe, but peers as well. Team members are really important in that space. So we work in the leadership under pressure space now and helping the leaders create conscious control, which means being in emotional control, because once you lose your stuff, it's really hard to get people on board. And some leaders still in this day and age, would you believe, still give themselves permission to fly off the handle or to not be as caring as they probably should be. So we do a lot of work in that space now, mate, especially after COVID, of course, where leaders are freaking out. So, yeah, it's good fun.
When I was young, I was told at a very early age there was no excuse for poor behaviour. And I get a little bit frustrated with people saying, we work under pressure, we're allowed to be a little bit more emotional, if you like, but I don't really buy that. I think particularly if you're responsible for groups of people, leaders don't fly off the handle. They remain calm and rational, and they work with all people in the space. And I guess in your role now as sort of a consultant in the space, the best places are ones where there's a real connection between the cleaner in the factory to the managing director of the factory.
Oh, well said, Robert. You might have to come and do some consulting with us soon, mate. And you've probably just then in a minute or two summed up like what's wrong in some workplaces, in all seriousness, but it's leaders still think in some workplaces, well, I'm under pressure, therefore I can just treat people however I want to in the moment, and then maybe even say sorry later, whether I'm sorry or not. And that's a real uncool attitude, as you know, because it hurts other humans. And I just feel like, with leadership's a bit like being Spider-Man, right? With great power comes great responsibility, as Uncle Ben said. And the thing is that leadership is, in my opinion, sort of the second most important job on planet Earth after being a parent. And when we step into that, when we realise that as leaders we have this impact on humans. And Robert, you and I, if we put this out to your listeners and we did a straw poll and we said, listen, could you remember the conversation you had with a leader that really hurt your heart, that really got you down, that was really uncalled for? And there'll probably be a show of hands. 9 out of 10 people say, yeah, absolutely, I can remember that, right? And I can remember that day and where I was, and it really hurt, and this is what they said. And leaders don't get that. Well, some leaders don't. They don't get that things they say out of a lack of emotional control today will sit with people for years, and they will never forget them. And on the other side of the coin, imagine the leaders that step into this, hey, I'm here to be a transformational leader, to help you be the best human you can be and to see you grow and develop. Even if I'm under pressure, I will still maintain my composure, my emotional behaviour and situational control so that you can feel cared for and supported. And we remember those leaders too. So I'll put it out to your listeners, which leader do we want to be? And more importantly, who do we want to work for? Do we want to work for a leader who we're going to remember for the wrong reasons, or do we want to be that leader that people look back and go, gee, I'm glad I worked for that human, they were so supportive, they were so caring, and that's who I want to be when I'm a leader.
Yeah, and there's the clear variety where you go into a place and you feel like you're working with your boss or your leader as opposed to for them, and not working under an environment of fear, like you're scared of doing the wrong thing and you're constantly on edge, as opposed to feeling like almost you're part of the company. You might not be pulling an extra wage as a company member, but you feel like the work you're doing is appreciated and you're part of the team, and that's just simply about the direction the leader sends down the line.
And the languaging they use, Robert, and the behaviour that they demonstrate, and the example they lead with, and how much they actually care and connect with their stuff. They don't give direction, they look for connection, right? And their communication's about, hey, let's go on the journey together, let's go and do this thing as a group. And I love that. I love the languaging you use. You've obviously really put some time into it, and you consider carefully the words that you say, which you do on radio, and it's a great skill. We want to work with leaders, not for them. And there's a real psychological shift when you say those sort of words, because it means that we're in this together. It's not a subservient relationship. Back in the day, team members used to be called subordinates. And, they're my subordinate. Oh, interesting. What does that really mean? Well, it means that, it's like you could nearly say master-slave relationship, which no one wants to be a subordinate. Like, that's a horrible word. They want to feel valued. And I get leaders that say, Anton, and get there, this is a really interesting conversation, because they don't get what not being valued means. They say, Anton, someone in my team said the other day they didn't feel valued. And I said, well, what did you say? And I said, well, I said, okay, well, what can I do? And how can I help you? And they said they weren't sure what that even meant. That the employee saying it wasn't sure, and let alone the leader not being sure. And so what I said to the leader was, people that don't feel valued are not heard. Now, if people aren't heard, they're hurt. They're not heard, they're hurt. And that's a really, really important, I guess, mindset for leaders to have, because a lot of our teams and our team members only want to be heard. They only want to share. They feel like they've got something to contribute. The best leaders, Robert, as you know, give people the ability, the permission, the authorization to shine, and to stand up and actually become their best versions of themselves. I've got to tell you, man, I watched this Pink doco the other day, Robert. Pink is such a strong leader. She had this tour documentary that she did on one of the tours, and she takes her kids and her family on these tours, and she said, I've got 225 team members and 2 kids to look after on this tour, right? And she just talked about how she looked after the team members. And for all your listeners out there, if you're looking for a leadership show that's got a little bit of singing in it and about someone like Pink who's a performer, she just epitomised leadership. Everything you and I have talked about, Pink summed up on a tour video and talked about how she looked after her team, got them involved and helped them shine. And I thought, wow. And I actually wrote a blog post about it the other day. It was that moving. I just loved the way that she stepped into leadership and what it really means to be a strong, caring, empathetic, psychologically safe leader. She even said she wants her team members to feel safe. Isn't that amazing? Imagine if every leader said that.
Yeah.
I want my team to feel safe, not just be safe.
I'm going to ask one more question in this space, then we're going off into a very personal space, which I promised to talk to you about. But at the moment, we had a conversation with former Greens leader Richard Di Natale this morning about the behaviour in the parliamentary space at the moment, and this is an area where people look at and they can be influenced by. In the position you're in and all the things that you've just spoken about, are you really concerned that company leaders will be looking at this behaviour and taking one of two options? One is, that is terrible, I never want to be like that, I'm going to do the exact opposite. Or the other one, which concerns me, is, well, if he can get away with it or she can get away with it, why can't I?
Mate, let's just hope, fingers crossed, hope and pray that it's the latter, not the former, right? My opinion would be that it would, I'm going to say, just because I usually have a positive outlook on life, that it's more the latter than the former, that, you know, that leaders can look at politicians and go, you know what, that is just so uncool when we're being like that. And, you know, we've got now 2 or 3 years of history from, you know, like, let's go back and let's go a little bit deeper again, Robert, back to the Brittany Higgins type tragedy. Let's call it a tragedy when people are really injured by their leaders, and that was in politics. And do you know that there was a Queensland MP who was, and I'm going to say this very specifically, ordered to go and do empathy training, Robert. Empathy training. Go and learn how to be empathetic. Right? And so, you know, we look at these leaders, and I just hope our business leaders don't take that as a sign of how to behave. I'm going to say that they don't know what, you know, no one's ever said to me, well, if our politicians can do it, great, I can too. I would just hope and pray to a degree that, you know, we look at those people. And, you know, I think we learn as much from poor leadership as we do from good leadership, and that's probably a good thing from a business perspective, where we can look at that and go, you know what, look how they look. Like, it just looks uncool, and they won't get the result that they want to get, you know, carrying on like that. So I just hope and pray that it's the latter, not the former. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, let's talk about aura. We all apparently have one. You've got an interesting view about one's little personal space and what it means and how it can affect and be affected by. I've got a regular listener to this show who's been waiting with bated breath for this conversation, I reckon, for 8 months. Tell us about your thoughts about this particular subject.
Right, Robert Cameron, and I've been blasting to tell your listeners about this. So just think, Robert, of the times and the people in your life that you would explain like this. So you'd be sitting in a room full of people, and all of a sudden one human walks in and they light the room up, right? And all of a sudden the energy in the room lifts just because they're in there. They haven't said anything or done anything. They've just walked in. And yes, we have the ability to walk into a room and drop the energy in the room, right? Now, what the science is showing at the moment, Robert, is that our emotional state is contagious. Our emotional state is contagious. And I'll tell you the psych behind it. We have these things called mirroring neurons. And what mirroring neurons are we're wired to, and these mirroring neurons show up, you know, in the early months of life. So when you're cradling your beautiful little human that's just been born, and you do and go at it, and you think, oh, geez, I've got a happy baby. Well, you haven't actually got a happy baby. The baby's learning how to mirror your behaviour, and it's learning on the run, because that's what babies do by watching in those early stages of life. So we have these things called mirroring neurons. So what happens is someone walks into the room who's energetic and positive. We buy into that emotionally. We get straight into that. We go, wow, if they're happy, hey, I'm going to do that as well. Smile and the world smiles with you. So our emotions are contagious. And we have something like, I have seen some science on this, a 9-metre energy field around us, right, that we carry with us. So we touch other people with our emotional state without even knowing that we're doing it, Robert. And that's why I say to leaders, be careful on how you show up and how you're feeling, because your emotions are contagious. And so the reason that they're contagious is because not only do we have mirroring neurons, we have this thing called an amygdala, an limbic system. So back prehistorically, we are wired to instantaneously in a millisecond, 0.12 of a second, the science tells us now, read someone else's emotional state to make a judgment call about what they're thinking and feeling right now. 0.12 of a second. And it happens naturally. We look at another human, and this doesn't happen in the frontal lobes where we're talking to ourselves or where we're processing information. It happens in our limbic system. So it's a natural thing. We don't even know it's happening. We can look at another human and instantaneously know what their emotional state is without even being able to process the fact that we've done that. And so couple the fact with we are, as humans, designed, wired to read someone else's emotional state. Because a couple of thousand years ago, we needed to be able to look at someone and go, is that friend or foe? We now say that the fight or flight mechanism or the freeze mechanism was for angry animals. Well, it wasn't angry animals. It was other human species a lot of the time. Because at one point in history, there was as many as 8 different Homo erectus sapien Neanderthal type species on the planet. If we came across another species of human, which was possible back then, we needed to know instantaneously, friend or foe, because there was we didn't have English back then, and it was clubbed to death if this person was foe, and I didn't run, or I didn't flee, or I didn't fight, guess what? Things ended badly really quickly. So we're wired to read other people's emotional states, then we're also wired to mirror them. So it's really easy to buy into someone's emotional state because we want to be liked, Robert. We actually want to connect with other humans. We're social species, so we want to connect. And all of a sudden, the fact that we can now know about auras and we carry this emotional state around with us, it touches others, and put all of that together, and there's the whole science for that particular listener who's into chakra. And do a little bit more research for your listeners on chakras. I'd call them auras, and I'd just call them emotions. Your emotions are contagious. It's just like smiling. Your expressions are contagious because people can read them. We think we can hide our emotional state, Robert. It comes out in your behaviour. It comes out in your facial expressions. We've got so many facial expressions. You look at a dog, and a dog doesn't have a lower face emotion. So look at my dog, and I need to look at my dog's eyes. It is a he, so my little dog Doogie, he smiles with his eyes, and that's why they're called puppy dog eyes. The human face smiles with the bottom of its face, right? So we see emotion, and our eyes follow our mouth. And, you'll say this, you would have heard this saying when someone says, yeah, I'm feeling really happy. Well, can you remind your face? because we think, there's people seriously that think they can hide their emotional state. We all try to do it when we're down and out, which is cool. Or we could just say, hey, I'm not in a great place today for this particular reason, and then own that. But remembering that, while we're down, other people will be down around us as well. It's just inevitable. There's a team I worked with, mate, and this is so sad. They could tell how their day was going to go because of the way one of their team members walked in. They listened to this team member's footsteps to see how their day was going to go. Can you believe that?
Yeah, I can, because I've lived it. Yeah, it's a very interesting point. We've run out of time. We're going to investigate this a little bit more because I wanted to talk about how this can be manipulated, if you like, but how people can maybe be seen through when they're trying to do what you've just said, but the body language is undermining them.
I love it. Hey, always a pleasure. I hope that helps your listener too. And a big shout out to that listener. Thanks for staying strong with us for 8 months, and hope that helps.
Good on you, mate. We'll talk next. Thank you very much. We'll be in touch. Anton Guinea, he always intrigues me with a very interesting view of life, business, and a fellow who sort of lived an accident and is doing something about making it better for others. We're going to do some sponsorship announcements to